Colorado locks up Deion Sanders with a contract extension. That's great for the Buffs, but questions remain.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth, where the NCAA is just no fun. But some teams might have a little fun looking at who enters the portal because of Stanford's sudden coaching change. That's all on today's show, which is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Yes, indeed, right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So the Buffs lock up Deion Sanders, a 5-year, $54 million extension, and I get it. I get where their heads are at. He has put Colorado football back on the map, where a lot of the older fans probably feel it should have been for a long time, and certainly has all the potential in the world to stay there, especially in a new world Big 12 that doesn't have Oklahoma or Texas in it. But the two questions I have about Deion Sanders go something like this. Number one, does this actually ensure another school doesn't come hunting for him in the coaching carousel one day? And number two, is this something Colorado could quickly learn to regret? We'll know the answer to that question by the end of 2025. Let's start with the first part of it, because the buyout for 2025 goes from $8 million to $12 million. That's what Deion Sanders would owe the school if he ends the contract by that time. And then the buyout goes down by $1 to $2 million per year in the coming years. Now, that's standard operating procedure for a coaching contract. But that level of buyout money is not scaring away everybody. It'll scare away most places. And if Deion Sanders is genuine in what he says about, I want to retire a Colorado Buffalo, I want to stay here, this is where I want to coach, this is where I want to be, then perhaps this is of no concern at all. But that buyout money didn't resonate with me like I thought it would. And so I pondered, is that an amount of money that no school would ever be willing to pay? Now, it depends on the financials of the situation. And look, one aspect of this that might cement him at Colorado more than it otherwise would have is the revenue sharing, because that's about to make college athletics way more expensive. And yes, a lot of places have tons of money and big buyouts are paid to coaches all the time. And when you hire a coach, you typically are paying his buyout to another place, right? That's a little bit different and typically not as expensive as a coach who you are firing and then paying the rest of his contract for. But in the house settlement era, where you can spend up to $20.5 million or somewhere in that range for this year, and that will likely go up in the coming years, when you can spend that, and it doesn't have to be NIL dollars directly on your players, and you're just paying them straight out of your athletic department budget, you have to be at that level, or else you're not going to be able to be competitive with everybody else because someone is doing that. So I'm curious to see how that impacts the coaching market, specifically here with Colorado, because, of course, Deion Sanders just got extended. But are athletic departments not going to be as willing to fire coaches because suddenly they have to pay the players a sizable chunk of change? I know these media rights contracts are valuable, everybody, but $20 million or up to or in that range, even for these big schools, that's not pocket change. So that's something that I don't think is going to settle in just yet, because we haven't seen all the terms of the house settlement, but that's kind of the expectation of it. So that's an angle that could help keep them there. However, if a school decided they really wanted Deion Sanders to be their head coach, yeah, $12 million, that's not way out of the realm of possibility. So that's one angle. And the second angle that came to mind when I saw this extension was, is Deion Sanders worth it? Now, from a total professional contract standpoint, yes, Deion Sanders, absolutely worth it, because the financial value he has brought to Colorado University, to the Buffs community, the city of Boulder, He's probably underpaid, just like Nick Saban. You could readily argue was underpaid for the time he spent at the University of Alabama, but that's how these things just tend to work out. So $54 million over 5 seasons. Deion Sanders is now one of about 10 head coaches, 10, 11 in college football that make $10 million or more on average per year. You've got Brian Kelly, who's sitting there at $9.9 million, which $100,000 is pocket change. I don't really know why they sit at 9.9, but contracts are strange. I'm sure that number is going up over time. You've got Bill Belichick, you've got Kalen DeBoer, you've got Lincoln Riley, you've got Steve Sarkisian, Dan Lanning got a raise this offseason. He's over $10 million. You've got Dabo Swinney, you've got Ryan Day, you have Kirby Smart. Those are the coaches who make $10 million or more per year coaching college football. It's a pretty good life. It's pretty darn good. By the way, I'll just point out only 3 of those coaches, the 3 highest paid, have won national championships. Worthy of note. But what I wonder with this contract, and I think we're going to know this answer this year, maybe not entirely, but we will get a big chunk of information, is will Deion Sanders actually prove himself worthy of that? Those coaches can all point to big time seasons that they've had and say, yeah, this is why I'm paid this amount. Certainly that's what their agents have all told the athletic directors, who they tend to run circles around at the negotiating table. But again, that's the way that all of this goes down. Bill Belichick's the other big question and outlier in here because he hasn't coached a single game, and I don't know how long. I have red flags about that entire situation over at North Carolina. But Kalen DeBoer took Washington to the national championship game. Yeah, bad first season in Alabama, but I suspect they will be improved, shall we say, on both sides of the ball this year. Lincoln Riley at USC, well, he hasn't had anything quite yet. Yeah, got to a Pac-12 championship game, got to a Cotton Bowl, lost both of them, and it's been downhill ever since. Steve Sarkisian was just in the national semifinal, driving for the tie against the eventual national champs. Dan Lanning just won the Big Ten. Dabo Swinney has 2 national titles. Day has 1, and Kirby Smart has 2. What's the mark of this was a good idea for Colorado fans? Does Deion Sanders need to win a Big 12 championship within the next 2 years? Within the next 3 years? The reason I say we're going to have a really good indicator this season is it's the first time in his career where he's coaching without Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, at least since he has been in the public eye. But at Colorado, they ran through those 2 guys offensively. They were never a great defensive team. I thought they improved last year significantly because of what they did on the defensive line. But Deion Sanders is going to prove himself worthy or not of this contract extension this year. Or at the very least, he is going to make Colorado fans or the general college football landscape concerned about what he's able to put together without a top 10 pick at quarterback and a Heisman Trophy winner who plays on both sides of the ball, unlike anybody we've really ever seen in the history of the sport. So I think this is a smart move if you are Colorado. It is kind of coaching contract extension season, and Deion Sanders financially has been incredible for your athletic department. From a football standpoint, do you have the other elements of buy-in that you need? Is the administration in lockstep? Do you do all the little things, the details? Do you have a financial commitment outside of the head coaching contract? Is the salary pool big enough for the assistant coaches? All those questions still kind of hang out there. It appears to me from the outside looking in that the answer is yes. But those 2 questions really at the top of my mind when Deion Sanders got extended. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. YouTube, Twitter, hit me up, all that good stuff. Speaking of Deion Sanders, he had a great idea recently. I mean, just a fantastic good idea. And the NCAA stinks. First, this episode brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, which there aren't that many of this year, to even who's cutting down the nets. It's going to be a 1 seed. But which one? I don't know. You all tell me. You can stay in the action with tournament games happening almost every day, it seems. There's always something exciting to bet on, and you can bet on college football. Win totals, Heisman odds, individual games, national championship odds is all over there at FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Check them out at FanDuel.com. The NCAA is a buzzkill, man. Just an absolute buzzkill. except I kind of agree with them here. So, speaking of Deion Sanders, he had a great idea recently that I have supported before. I continue to support the more I think about it, but won't come to fruition this year. That idea is, hey, let's organize a spring game, scrimmage, open practice, whatever. Something that involves another team. Something where we have our guys going up against players who they're not seeing in practice every day. Something for fans and for television networks who we know are really running the sport behind the scenes. Not that that's a good thing, but it's a reality, unfortunately. Something for those folks and everybody, myself included, to watch and see one team go against another and get a better snapshot, more clear information about what to expect for certain programs, about what they need to address, how strong they really are, how good a particular recruit or transfer player is. I mean, the biggest thing, quite frankly. In the age of the transfer portal quarterback, can you imagine a spring game that is likely televised where Miami and I don't know, Florida State just do some work against each other and you get to watch Thomas Castellanos take the field for FSU and Carson Beck take the field if he were fully healthy for Miami? I think that'd be really fun. I think it'd be a great idea. And so Deion Sanders threw this out there, and then Fran Brown at Syracuse said, hey, we're way away. I mean, way away from Boulder, but we'll come out. Let's do it. Let's set it up. And they were looking into this. This was not a for show virtue signal on Twitter of look at what cool idea we want to do and then not actually do it. No, they were serious. They were absolutely 100% locked in, and the NCAA said no. So a couple of questions about that. Question number one, why does the NCAA get to decide? Why do they only pop up? Anytime the NCAA is actually involved with college football news or college football happenings, nothing good is ever going on. The NCAA is not just uninvolved with the college basketball tournament going on right now. That's not a thing. They're running, they're organizing. But with college football, we've just kind of understood because many moons ago, they yielded power in the sport to the television executives and to the conferences rather. And the conferences kind of yielded it to the television executives, but the NCAA is detached. And so the NCAA can come in and just shut this down when they don't govern significant. Sure, they made the rules once upon a time. Yeah, we really need them for that. That's really important. Big work going on over there at NCAA headquarters. But they are able to step in and say, well, Syracuse, Colorado, here's a great idea that'd be good for the sport. There's our stamp of disapproval. Denied. Nerds. Anyway, so question number two, can we get it next year then? Because the reasoning the NCAA gave wasn't completely ridiculous. I take any chance I get to dunk on them because they've made too many mistakes to not get dunked upon whenever possible over the years. But next year, this is still an idea that could come to fruition and I think would be great for college football. What the NCAA said is, hey, it's too late in the process. It'd be an unfair advantage to Colorado or Syracuse from a recruiting standpoint because, hey, they could hype this up to recruits and they could have another team on campus. And some teams have already scheduled their spring games and it's too late for that sort of stuff. Or it's pretty comical anytime they cite academic reasons like, well, there are academic hurdles. Yeah, nobody cares. Stop pretending. So I look at that outcome and say, well, I'm disappointed they didn't just let them do it this year. I mean, I guess it'd be an advantage. So they would get an advantage for having a revolutionary idea that they'd have to orchestrate and coordinate themselves. And in order to get any sort of recruiting advantage, they would have to, put in the work, put in the time. Gee, I don't know. I think we should incentivize places to be innovative, to be creative, to create a better fan experience, to improve the sport in any way. I think those things should be incentivized and rewarded, but hey, who the heck am I? I'm just some schmuck talking into a microphone. So I look at what this outcome was and say, well, that's not what I was hoping for, but I'm optimistic that, hey, if we schedule this ahead of time, like summer months this year, guys, start thinking ahead. You already do it with the recruiting aspect. Why can you not go in there and in your communications with players and whatnot, just kind of throw out a couple phone calls? Hey, You want to come up? I've got Kenny Dillingham saying he'd love to do it with a former Pac-12 school. I've got coaches all over the country that I have seen who have said, yeah, I'd love to do it. Joey McGuire at Texas Tech said, hey, some other Texas schools would be really good. Yes, it would. We could go up to your place. You could come down to our place. We could just do an open practice. That way no one's at risk of getting injured. I don't care if it's 7-on-7. That would be more exciting. Not that spring games aren't great. They are. Everyone should keep them. Still more exciting than watching a team go against itself because it's harder to have takeaways. If the offense plays well, is it good offense, bad defense? Is it good defense, bad offense? We don't really know. So everybody wins when you organize this, so I will continue to lobby for that as time goes on. Speaking of the NCAA, I just wanted to throw this one out there. If you haven't heard, Jeremy Pruitt, the Tennessee head coach who was fired in 2021 for giving out some dollars to recruits and whatnot, bags of cat, just kind of the old standby, breaking the rules and whatnot. He's suing the NCAA for $100 million. He said he'd let the jury decide, how much would be appropriate. Good, because I don't know that $100 million. You want to argue lost wages because he was fired at Tennessee. He's saying there was some big conspiracy between Tennessee and the NCAA to get him out of there. I mean, fines still had to be paid by the University of Tennessee as a result of what happened in the recruiting violations here. I do think Jeremy Pruitt has a point. I just don't know if it's going to hold up legally because his point is essentially, hey, you're letting these kids go around and earn insane amounts of money. They're getting paid buku bucks. They're getting all these dollars. They're doing all this sort of stuff. And I got fired for that very reason. That's why I was terminated as the head coach of Tennessee, is apparently because of this scandal. Well, I think it was all propped up. I'm not going to dive into whether I think it was all propped up one way or the other. I do think, though, two things at the same time. Yes, Jeremy Pruitt has a right to feel frustrated that at least a contributing factor to his removal from the Tennessee head coaching position was, well, you were giving, money in bags to players. That's not, you can't do that. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars. Okay. You can't do that. On the other hand, everyone's kind of doing it now. However, Jeremy Pruitt, and let this be a lesson to any other college football coaches out there with whatever rules come down. Even if the rule is wrong and you don't like the rule, it doesn't mean your violation of those rules should just be nullified. The rules are still there. They were still in place. Yeah, now players are earning. Yeah, now it's different. But it wasn't different when you were there. And ultimately, when you're the head coach of a major program like that, you have to hold yourself and your staff and your players to the standard of the rules, or else everybody would just do whatever they want. Now, in some ways, in many ways, I'm sure, that's happened for a very long time. But once guidelines and rules and restrictions come out with this House settlement and the oversight committee that could be there for, college football and the payments and all, you're like, there's all this sort of stuff. You may not like exactly how it goes, but that doesn't mean you aren't still responsible for the violation of those rules when you know that they are there. So I wish Jeremy Pruitt all the best of luck, because if he can get something out of it, I don't think it'd be completely wrong. But $100 million? I don't know. Okay, we might be stretching it there. I'm not stretching this take about why you need to know, no matter who you are a fan of, about Stanford.
The NCAA tournament is here, and so is the bracket breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
I still cannot believe that Andrew Luck is the first general manager to fire a head coach in college football. That's a crazy sentence. It's 100% accurate. And you know what? We all better get used to it. The interesting thing, though, before I touch on David Bailey, who's going to change somebody's program here in the next year defensively, and a couple other guys perhaps as well from the Cardinal, I don't think every GM is going to have this level of influence. I think certain GMs can. Andrew Luck is the biggest face of Stanford football. I mean, what he did in college, what he did in the NFL, his whole aura, football IQ and acumen. There's nothing about him that isn't good for Stanford to have him around. How many other GMs in college football right now, not talking in the future, but right now, could legitimately pull the trigger and almost unilaterally, at least that's how it seems, fire the head coach? Yes, there was an off-season or off the field scandal component and the report about, abusive behavior by Coach Taylor. That's a contributing factor. Is it the only factor though? Or did Andrew Luck come in and say, I want to hire my guy who shares my vision for the Stanford Cardinal? Because that's how I want to run things. Everybody wants to run things in their own way. I don't think every GM could do this, but as time goes on, there will be programs across the country at the FCS level, at the Group 5 level, at the Power 4 level that are going to bring in GMs who have that sort of ability. I don't know how many there will be in the short term. I don't think you could bring in a GM at Colorado and fire Deion Sanders. I do think if Alabama brought in a certain GM, he could move on from Kalen DeBoer if he doesn't hit 10 wins this year. That's something that could happen. I think you could see that at several programs across the country. Anyway, so back to the Stanford situation and why it relates to you, college football fan of insert X team. David Bailey is among the most impactful transfers defensively that is in the transfer portal right now or will be in the portal by the time it opens on April 15th. Because April 15th is going to roll around and the spring portal window will open and you'll see all sorts of players go in who have varying degrees of experience and recruiting ratings and transfer ratings and all this sort of stuff. There are no doubts in my mind about David Bailey. I'll have doubts, questions, concerns, thoughts, comments, and all that about anybody that goes in the portal, of course, and we'll be discussing them here on the show, which is why you should subscribe if you haven't already, because there will be plenty of a portal talk come April 15th in the lead up and in the aftermath as well. But David Bailey is somebody who's going into his fourth year of college football. And if your school landed this guy coming out of high school, you would have been stoked. And if you land him out of the transfer portal, you should be stoked. He's going into his fourth season. He was an incredibly highly rated recruit. Once upon a time, Stanford was actually able to recruit high school kids pretty well. They started to dip their toe into the water in the transfer portal more. I suspect that's something Andrew Luck is working on for his now ACC school. But David Bailey had a composite rating on 24/7 of over 97 coming out of high school. He's a borderline 5-star. He had 2.5 sacks his first season, 5 sacks his second year, 7 sacks this past year for the Cardinal in their first year in the ACC. He was a top 70 player nationally. He was the number 7 edge prospect. This is frankly the sort of guy who most people might be surprised that he ever went to Stanford in the modern era of college football, or that he stayed at Stanford as long as he did. But you fire a head coach, you signal a program reset with Andrew Luck in there, and he decides, yeah, this is not the place for me anymore. And so because his coach was fired, he goes into the transfer portal. Will he come out before the window opens? We'll see. I think there's an interesting amount of gamesmanship and strategy for a kid who wants to transfer, who is able to right now, as Stanford is, because when your head coach leaves, no matter the time of year, you have a 30-day window to enter the transfer portal. But remember, most kids can only go in at a certain time. You can come out of the portal whenever you would like. And so he could wind up coming out of the portal before it opens again on April 15th, or he could wait for the craziness to start and maybe the offers fly up. But right now, I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a more tangibly impactful player who comes in. He is going to play on Sundays. This is a Sunday player who is in the portal right now. And he just proved over the last couple of years he can be productive in a Power 4, Power 5 conference. So the school that picks him up gets somebody who's got all the physical traits to play in the NFL, who's got the experience, who's got proven production, who has shown growth over the last several years, who's been in the weight room for the last several seasons. And, he was at Stanford. You can anticipate absolutely zero off-the-field issues or concerns here with anything, because Stanford only admits a certain kind of kid. David Bailey, therefore, of course, fits that particular bill. So, I'm curious to see where he winds up. Haven't seen an offer list yet at this time, but this is going to be one of the biggest defensive linemen that moves in the transfer portal this cycle, unless I really get shocked. But right now, if coaches are looking through their spring portal depth chart and going, I don't love what we have at the edge position, he's an outside guy, but definitely along that defensive line. I don't love what we have at the edge position. They'd be wise to get on the phone, first with their NIL collective leader and say, what do we have available? And then call David Bailey and say, here's what we have available. That's what they should do, of course. Who will? Time will tell. But he's not the only Cardinal player. There are 3 who have gone into the portal. The other one, since Troy Taylor was fired, the other one is Medea Rubin. Now, coming off an injury this past year, that can scare you away. I get it. Medea Rubin at wide receiver is not somebody you should go to and say, hey, he's going to be our number 1 guy. He's going to be our go-to target. I mean, we're going to lean on him to be the alpha of our receiving corps. Nope, I don't think that's what you're getting here. You are, once again, getting a guy who was not as highly recruited coming out of high school as David Bailey was. He was a top 100 wide receiver. Nothing special, but certainly nothing to completely disregard. I've watched this guy play football a good amount over the last couple of years. Yes, the Cardinal have had better wide receivers. He was overshadowed over the last couple of years by this guy named Alec Iomanner, who, of course, is now off to the NFL draft. But Medea Rubin, coming out of high school, top 100 receiver, battled an injury last year. All right, those are not great things, but has been in college for several years. You don't have weight room issues. You don't have off-the-field issues. You maybe have some production issues. I think this is someone you bring in to be a number 2 or number 3 on your receiving core. He is 6'2", 210 pounds. Very prototypical big body target. The sort of guy down at Stanford, they train you to do one thing and one thing only if you're a receiver or a tight end. Not only, but perhaps they prioritize this element. You have to be able to win a 50-50 ball. David Shaw was famous for decades. Jim Harbaugh did this too, but Shaw really accentuated over the years. When you get down in the red zone, find a tall guy who's got a big body and just throw him a jump ball, let him box out like he's playing basketball, go up and make a catch. Medea Rubin, big body wide receiver. Again, 6'2", 210. I'd take that. I'd take that if I had the chance. Again, I wouldn't trust him to be a number 1. I think on a good receiving core, he could be a number 2. On a great receiving core, he's a number 3. So if you're looking for that sort of guy, and it could be because of an injury, it could be because of a lack of depth, I think he winds up somewhere and can be a solid contributor. But right now, the Stanford guy to keep your eye on, David Bailey. Not the last time his name pops up on this show. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.